I call the
Madam Speaker.
I call the Honourable Chris Finlayson.
Madam Speaker, it's always good to follow Mr Tirakatini in this House. I acknowledge him. And can I also acknowledge his late auntie, Whetū? Because I think in the old days when there were 4 Maori seats, her seat of Southern Maori started around Mahia Peninsula and went all the way down the west coast and then took in all the South Island. So when her nephew complains about all the work that he has to do, all I'd say to him is, get real, Auntie had far more territory to cover. But Whetū was a great woman, and I thoroughly enjoyed her company as I got to know her in later years. This is the final stage of the legislative process for this legislation. It was introduced on 20 December 2016, and Mr Kurako was then the chair of the Select Committee and steered it through the committee stages after it was referred to the Select Committee on 14 March 2017, and now it's back in the House for its 3rd reading. Can I also begin by acknowledging the negotiators over the years for Te Tira, John Whanga and Tamati Olsen. They always had a very commercial approach to matters, but at the same time were adamant that the cultural component of the settlement had to in some way acknowledge the degree of land loss. It's very easy with treaty settlements simply to talk about the money or the commercial opportunities. There's so much more to a treaty settlement than that, and I've said on many occasions that treaty settlements are not mere commercial deals. They're a lot more important than that. But John and Tamati did a great job, especially with the difficult negotiations over Te Urewera, and I acknowledge them and thank them for their service to their iwi. I also acknowledge the Crown representatives, my old friend Pat Snedden. I'm sure Pat won't mind my saying this, but he's an old lefty, and he phoned me shortly after I became the minister because he'd been involved with Te Tira over the years and also with the iwi of the far north, and he said, I suppose you want my resignation? And I said, oh no, Pat, just carry on. And he did a great job over the years for me as a Crown negotiator, and I greatly appreciated getting to know him and working with him. He certainly has a heart as big as the Rohe of Te Tira, and I acknowledge him and what he's done for his country over the years. And I also acknowledge John Harbord for his work as the Crown negotiator. I think the Deputy Prime Minister once said that I only appointed, quote, my mates as Crown negotiators. Well, Pat Snedden's many things, but he ain't my mate. But that having been said, well, he ended up my mate, I suppose. A very nice guy, and like so many of the statements that Mr Peters made, that was scrambled and off the mark. It's been a tremendous pleasure to work with the various LNGs of Ngāti Kahungunu over the years. They're a magnificent iwi that are going to play their part not only on the east coast of New Zealand but throughout the country in the years to come. And so on 17 December 2010 I signed a deed of settlement with Ngāti Pahuera, a wonderful group of people in the northern part of the bay, and of course I've been dealing with them over their foreshore and seabed arrangements. And then on 25 May 2013 I signed a deed of settlement on behalf of the Crown with Mongahararu Tangitu, and they too, and I think of Bevan Taylor and all the wonderful people there, have contributed so much to the region. Mana Iwi Hapū and the Crown signed a deed of settlement on 13 June 2017, and I very much look forward to when their legislation can be introduced to the House. I know, I'm sure Mr Nash won't mind my saying so, he and I have been anxious about that. I'd like to see that legislation introduced there leadership has compromised to a great extent and have been dealing with some pretty strong opposition, and financially they've suffered as a result of delays, and I think it would be good if the Crown could recognise that. Heratonga Tamatia and I signed a deed of settlement on 26 September 2015, and of course their legislation only recently had its third reading, and they are a fantastic bunch of people as well. This deed of settlement, as has been said, was signed at Takitimu Marae on 26 November 2016, and so all that leaves is Wairarapa, and I'm surprised that they haven't got there, because Ron Marks in Cabinet and should be jollying them along. And they signed an agreement in principle with me on 7 May 2016, and I think they're going through the ratification work now. And so when you add up the cumulative total of the various LNGs of Ngāti Kahungunu, normally two sets of comments are made to me. The first, from many mean-spirited people, is why have they got over 350 million all up? And I have to say to them, well, just look around you, look at the extent of the land loss, look at the history. The extent of the land loss in Wairoa alone is massive, and that is why they have a treaty settlement of that order. The other comment that's made, best exemplified by our old friend Hekia Parata, who was a Ngāti Porou, or is a Ngāti Porou person to her fingertips, is why did they get so much? We never got that. And I have to say, well, bad luck, their land loss was greater. So I acknowledge all the LNGs of Ngāti Kahungunu, and this is an appropriate time to congratulate each and every one of them for their huge contribution, as I say, not only to the east coast of the North Island, but to New Zealand, and I truly do believe that their very best days are ahead of them. In question time, there was a scrambled question that I think came from Mr. Peters related to Ngāpuhi, and why can't they settle in glacial pace? Well, of course, I think probably part of the problem with Ngāpuhi is that so many of the Ngāpuhis are related to him, which explains the problems. But I think the reality of the matter is that they simply haven't had the leadership that one would see in Great Iwi like Kahungunu. And I would say to Mr. Peters and one of his henchmen, Mr. Jones, sitting there, who, along with Mr. Peters, wants to abolish the Maori seats. I tell that to Ngāti Kahungunu. They want to abolish the Maori seats. I would say to them, if they look at the leadership, the outstanding leadership of Ngāti Kahungunu, and all the great people who have come up through the LNGs when the moment was needed to show that leadership, then I suggest that they could look to Kahungunu and learn a thing or two from them. Finally, so I want to wish Ngāti Kahungunu and all the LNGs that make it up all the very best for the future. And can I say I'll be keeping a very close look on the relationship with Tūhoi. Wira Gardner did a tremendous amount of work to bring the various groups together over the arrangements for Te Urewera. If there's anything that simply has to succeed in the years to come, it's Te Urewera. And I know that there's tremendous goodwill on the part of Tūhoi and Ngāti Kahungunu to make sure that that happens, and with goodwill and with the kind of leadership that we've seen over the years with negotiations, I have no doubt at all that that will happen. So congratulations to Ngāti Kahungunu. It's wonderful to have you in this House, and I very much look forward to seeing you in the years to come as this great iwi grows and continues to contribute to New Zealand.
Just before I call the member, I just point out to the House that we have turned out the lights at the end of there. There was one that was flickering, and we know how that drives people crazy. It's not that we're turning out the lights on.
Madam Speaker,
I call the Honourable Shane Jones.
before I speak in Māori, as the last